Planets colliding, comets snuffing out all life, dragons vomiting floods. Hollywood has nothing on these historical apocalyptic prophecies. The Chronica Majora begins with the biblical story of the creation, and in 3 volumes documents a contemporary version of world history until the year 1259. The work of a celebrated historian of his time, a Benedictine monk named Matthew Paris, the Chronica records his version of the final days. Paris believed he saw a pattern in world events leading to an apocalypse he thought would occur sometime in December of 1250, and he painted a pretty dark picture of what he thought would happen. Abnormal weather events like floods, famines, and earthquakes took center stage in his prediction, but Paris also recorded strange things appearing in the night sky. He wrote of falling stars, raging dragons, and a strange incident where 3 suns appeared in the sky all at the same time. He further described a wind that turned the air yellow and infected the Earth's population with diseases. In the end, Paris failed to predict the apocalypse, but his account was so relentless and terrifying it still resonates with many people today. The idea of an apocalypse-causing collision with another planet is rooted in a 1976 book called The 12th Planet. Supposedly based on ancient texts, it claims the planet Nibiru showed up every 3,600 years and was supposed to reappear in 2003. When the so-called Nibiru cataclysm didn't happen, it was rescheduled to 2012, about the same time the Mayan calendar predicted the world's end. When no rogue mystery planet destroyed the Earth in a fiery collision in 2012, the date was reset to April 2017. The April date came and went, but believers rescheduled for September, then October, and finally November. None of these dates saw Earth's collision with Planet X, so naturally the theory had to be adjusted. According to the new theory, Nibiru hadn't hit Earth, but the near miss had caused unusual weather and natural phenomena that would eventually lead to Earth's destruction. After the infamous Waco siege of the compound in 1993, David Koresh became famous as the leader of the religious sect known as the Branch Davidians. While Koresh made the headlines, his religious organization had been around in another form long before the events in Waco, and its teachings were always apocalyptic. In her book David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, Sarah Harvey wrote that the movement was established by a man named Victor Houteff. A member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Houteff was asked to leave when his controversial ideas about the end of the world clashed with established church doctrine. Houteff started his own faith movement known as the Shepherd's Rod, which preached a Bible doctrine that said followers would be the only ones to survive the coming apocalypse.
It says those of us who are alive and remain here and aren't dead yet, when he comes, they'll be taken up into heaven, just like that.
In 1934, Houteff began calling his followers to a compound in Waco, Texas, where they would begin preparations for the end times. According to Houteff's study of biblical prophecy, he calculated the 1,260 days of Revelation would start on November 9, 1955, after the earth was visited by 7 plagues. Ultimately, Houteff didn't live to see if his interpretation of prophecy was correct. He died in February of 1955, and the group splintered into factions, including the Branch Davidians that David Koresh would later lead. Apocalypse manuscripts were the best sellers of the medieval world. Surviving examples suggest that they were often ornately illustrated and written in languages other than Latin. This indicates that they were intended to be accessible to the people and not just the clergy. The contents of many aren't just fire and brimstone sermons. They depict graphic images of the end times arriving on the backs and even in the stomachs of some very odd creatures. Terrible monsters vomiting up floods appears to be a motif that appears in many depictions of the end times. One 11th century manuscript illustrates a dragon vomiting a dark, murky flood and drowning sinners denied entrance into heaven. Monsters also vomited up floods of other disgusting things like frogs. This would have horrified the people because frogs were considered unclean spirits, and illustrations of frogs coming out of the mouths of their preachers signified that when the end was near, it would be hard to know who to trust. While it might be tempting to laugh at our ancestors for believing some of the wilder prophecies about the impending apocalypse, recent history has its fair share of these too. A book written in 1974 entitled The Jupiter Effect claimed cataclysmic natural disasters would destroy the world on March 10, 1982, when the planets aligned on the same side of the sun. What made the claims put forth in the book seem plausible was that an astrophysicist and an astronomer wrote it. Although most members of the scientific community did not take the book seriously, others did. To them, it seemed perfectly logical the alignment might interfere with gravitational forces acting on the planets and create some issues with natural processes. Some people even added portents of widespread disease outbreaks to other natural disasters.
If there is a zombie-like disease outbreak in our future, it could be the spark that ignites the flame of our demise.
Thankfully, nothing happened, and even the book's authors backed off their position before the prophesied day. Still, in an odd turn of events, in 2022, researchers confirmed the interior of Jupiter contained what was described as remains of cannibalized baby planets. So maybe this version of a possible zombie apocalypse isn't so unbelievable after all. In 1524, the world was thrown into chaos when a prophecy claimed a second great flood was on the way that would destroy the earth. This prophecy was taken so seriously that many people fled their homes, selling their property for a fraction of what they were worth, impoverishing themselves in the process. Why did people find this particular prophecy so terrifying? Mainly because it came from a well-respected, learned person. Johannes Stoffler was a professor in the chair of mathematics at the University of Tübingen in Germany. A maker of astronomical instruments, he had published works that recorded the position of celestial bodies over decades. Noticing the 6 known planets would align inside the constellation of Pisces on February 24, 1524, he took it as a sign a new flood was on the horizon. Fear of that coming catastrophe ruined countless lives, however, and when the world didn't end as he'd predicted, Stoffler apologized. Apparently, the mathematician had made a slight error in his calculations. Instead of the year 1524, he had meant 1624. In the past, apocalyptic predictions were the domain of religious leaders and philosophers, but in the 21st century, all it takes is a single Instagram post. That happened in 2012 when a post on the social media site kicked off a whole theory that the end of the world had already happened and not a soul had even noticed. The idea was that physicists working with the CERN collider had discovered the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle, and accidentally created a black hole and opened a gateway into another dimension.
The Higgs boson, of course, was kind of a holy grail to find because we knew it was there, and finally we managed to find it.
Scientists were quick to debunk the story that the CERN collider was a black hole-making machine, but the idea of the world disappearing with a flip of a switch was so unnerving that the conspiracy theory kept circulating. Then, in 2016, the story took on new life when the tabloid press reported strange-looking clouds hanging over the border between France and Switzerland. This added fuel to speculation that, despite what the scientists said, CERN actually had opened a gateway to another dimension. Although scientists continue to reassure the public a CERN-driven black hole incident never happened, some believe their story is just a cover-up of an apocalypse that happened more than 10 years ago. In 1500, Sandro Botticelli painted something entirely unique. The Mystical Nativity was Botticelli's most unusual piece. Not only was it the only piece he ever signed, it was also painted on canvas instead of wood, and includes some unusual imagery for a nativity. Experts believe this painting was probably never meant for public display because it depicts a mystical vision of the world's end. Botticelli lived in a time of great social, economic, and political upheaval, so it isn't surprising his work would reflect a belief that he might also be living during the time referenced in the Book of Revelation. It's believed that Botticelli's work was heavily influenced by the preaching of Girolamo Savonarola, a charismatic friar who took to the streets of Florence to share his apocalyptic visions with the people. Looking at Botticelli's mystical nativity can be puzzling for viewers today. Still, the people at Botticelli's time would have understood the glimpses he provided of what to expect during the apocalypse, including images of demons waiting to impale sinners and even a tiny, almost invisible dragon. In 1910, French astronomer Camille Flammarion started a panic when he calculated our planet would pass directly through the tail of Halley's Comet. The New York Times caused great alarm when it quoted Flammarion saying that passing through the comet's tail would create events that could possibly snuff out all life on the planet. Although other authorities swore that that wasn't going to happen, the general population was thrown into a panic. People crowded into churches and panic-bought supplies. Others decided to capitalize on the hysteria by selling protective gear and anti-comet pills, as well as even an elixir for escaping the wrath of the heavens. Of course, when the comet didn't bring about the apocalypse, Flammarion returned to pursuing his interest in spiritualism and psychic research, eventually becoming a successful science fiction writer. There are few apocalyptic predictions more terrifying than the end of days described by the Vikings. Much of what's known today about their beliefs comes from the Prose Edda, an Icelandic manuscript written in the early 13th century. The Edda predicts the world's end as a series of events beginning with a terrible winter that lasts for 3 years. The resulting famine leads the mortals to turn on each other and eventually involves the gods, ending in a great battle known as Ragnarok, or the Twilight of the Gods.
The Norse myths are very different. The gods are different from the Greek ones in the sense that they always know that they're going to die.
After the horrible winter, the sun, moon, and stars are swallowed by wolves, and darkness reigns on Earth. A massive wolf named Fenrir breaks its chains and devours Odin, and a great sea serpent, Jormungandr, is killed by Thor, who dies as the serpent rains poison down on everything left. Ultimately, the Norse gods lose their fight against the fire and frost giants, and the fire giant Surtur engulfs the earth in flames. In time, the flames are quenched as the earth is swallowed by water and reborn. Some gods return, and a pair of mortals who survive the apocalypse repopulate the earth. Recently, the Jorvik Viking Center predicted Ragnarok would begin on February 22, 2014. That may have been a publicity stunt, however, because that date coincided suspiciously with the end of their 30th annual Viking festival. On November 18, 1978, Jim Jones ordered the deaths of over 900 people at the Jonestown Agricultural Commune in Guyana. Images of the Jonestown mass murder-suicide are among the most shocking in recent history, making it easy to overlook everything that led up to that moment. Jim Jones was born in 1931 and would have been a young teenager when the world changed forever with the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like many living in the post-World War II generation, it's not hard to imagine that Jones grew up with a deep-seated fear of a nuclear apocalypse. As an adult and leader of the People's Temple, a semi-religious cult originally based in Indiana, Jones claimed to have received a vision of the Midwestern United States being targeted by nuclear bombs. To escape this disaster, Jones relocated his followers first to California and later to Guyana in South America. Unfortunately, Jones's paranoia grew over time, probably fueled by his growing dependence on drugs and his fear that the world was edging closer to nuclear annihilation.
He used to say, when I go, I'll be the most hated man on the planet. You know, my name will be on everybody's lips.